Candace is a 4-star Hydro Polearm unit with a pretty unique and somewhat complex kit, so today we're going to go over her relevance in the meta and whether she's worth investing your resources in. Disclaimer: Meta stands for Most Efficient Tactic Available, which essentially means that a unit's placement in the meta correlates to how well they augment a team's damage potential in the game's hardest content, namely the Spiral Abyss. With that being said, a unit not being meta doesn't make them unusable or a bad unit, but rather, there are better options when it comes to squeezing out every drop of damage possible. With that being said, let's get straight into the video. So let's start with her talents. Candace's normal attacks have pretty high multipliers for a 4-star, especially at level 1. If you want comparison, Yunjin level 1, Polearm 40-40, I don't know, Xingqiu level 1, even Fischl level 1, Miko, she's a 5-star, level 1, Traveler. So as you can see, like, I don't know, Cole, she has basically, some of the best normal attack scaling on a 4-star. I haven't looked through all of them, but from the looks of it, she's at least up in the top. So this is really good if you plan to build her as a main carry. And, with her burst, and we'll get to all of that, but this is pretty good. Her elemental skill is very reminiscent of Beto's or Yunjin's. It has a tap and a hold version as well, wherein the tap version will make Candace instantly rush forward with her shield, doing hydro damage. The hold version makes Candace hold up her shield to block incoming damage before slamming her spear into the ground, doing hydro damage. This has damage potential. You can hit really high numbers, but I think it's also important to keep in mind that unless you're a whale who can afford, like Primordial Jade Wing Spear, R5, best in slot, perfect artifacts, the right team, heavy investment into her skills and whatnot, you probably won't be doing enough damage to really make her a viable option over most other carries in the game. So just keep that in mind. Her shield's strength, as well as the damage that it does, scales with her max HP. And it also absorbs hydro damage 250% more effectively, but that's rather useless since 9 times out of 10 you won't be using a hydro unit against hydro enemies, but whatever. Her elemental burst is the core of her kit, wherein she raises her shield and grants the active user a hydro infusion on their weapon. This means that catalyst and bow users won't be able to take advantage of her burst. In addition, her burst also grants a 20% elemental damage bonus to normal attacks, and a wave of hydro damage will occur when swapping between units on the team. This damage also scales off of her max HP. Now that we've reviewed her kit, let's discuss her relevance in the meta. I'm not gonna lie, Candace isn't meta at all, at least not in the current state of the game. The thing about characters that provide elemental infusions to other units like C6 Bennett or Chongyun is that most of the time it isn't necessary. Any unit that relies on elemental infusions to output damage, such as Yoimiya, Ayato, Hu Tao, and so on, have their infusions built into their kit naturally. Keqing, you E again, and she gives herself an electro infusion. Yoimiya, you E, she gives herself a pyro infusion. Ayato, you E, he gives himself a hydro infusion. So having Candace on the team purely for a hydro infusion, while it may come in handy and it may create some fun niche teams, she's just taking up an extra slot to provide something that isn't necessary for these units. This means that the only way to make full use of her Hydro Infusion is to use it on a unit that otherwise doesn't have an infusion of their own. But this leads to several issues, namely that units that don't have infusions built into their kits aren't meant to be relying on infusion damage as their main source of damage output. Take a unit like Kazuha, for example. While it would be nice to have a Hydro Infusion on him to help him swirl Hydro and whatnot, the bulk of his damage and his utility lies in his skill and his burst. Doing animo damage, swirling elements, elemental damage bonuses and whatnot. He doesn't need a Hydro Infusion. He doesn't need to be doing Hydro damage. Take a character like Sing Cho, who is a Hydro sword user. Sing Cho is an off-field enabler, really, for reactions. You throw him out, you E twice. If you're running Sack Sword, use his burst, get him off the field, someone else does the carrying. You don't really want Sing Cho on the field doing Hydro damage with his normals, because that's just not the way he was designed. And I mean, sure, it's a way you can do it. I'm a huge fan of Sing Cho. I would love to run DPS Sing Cho and have him on the field, cutting everything down. But the reality of the situation is that his normal attacks just don't have high enough scaling to make this, a worthwhile investment. Because I seriously considered it, but I'm not going to level his normal attacks just to run Candace with him, when that's not even the best way to even, utilize it. And then take a character like Razor, who does rely on his normal attacks and spends a whole lot of time on field doing normal attacks, and Candace's burst gives the users an elemental damage bonus to the normal attacks, so when he does do his Hydro damage, he'll get the bonus, the high scaling. It sounds perfect, but Razor is a physical carry, which means that an elemental infusion literally ruins his damage. Not to mention, when it comes to doing physical damage, the only elements you really want are Electro, Cryo, maybe Geo or Animo. Hydro would cause unnecessary freeze and electro charged, and it would complicate the matter. Not to mention, again, it would destroy his damage output. And speaking of her 20% elemental normal attack damage buff, Yujin just beats her out. If you want a character that's going to buff your normal attacks, just use Yunjin. If you don't have her, of course, then of course Candace would be your next best bet. But if you do have Yunjin, she just gives you a flat damage increase off of her defense. It's not even locked to elemental damage. Whether you use elemental damage, whether you don't, Yunjin will support you either way. As opposed to Candace, who not only doesn't give as much of a buff, but she also locks her normal attack damage buff behind it being an elemental infused normal attack, which makes her situation all the more difficult. As it stands, there aren't really very many characters that can synergize with Candace, because again, the main bulk of her utility and the main, core of her value as a unit is her Hydro Infusion on her burst. But it only applies to melee characters, so all bow and catalyst users are immediately out. And then characters like D-Luke might be able to take advantage of this, since as long as probably use her burst and then use his normals, weave in these. But Sing Cho exists, Yelan exists, so if you need off-field Hydro damage, or if you need to, weave in some Hydro damage, there are better options. Now, of course, if you don't have Sing Cho or Yelan, then again, she is your next best bet. But this is a meta video. I expect that most meta players have at least been around for a little bit and may have collected, a few characters. Xingqiu was just on the last banner. So, I'm just saying, it's just really hard to find a spot where Candace really fits when all of the things she does is either niche or is just straight out a downgrade from what other characters can do better. This means that Candace will forever belong to a group of niche units with fun abilities but little to no relevance in the meta, at least as it is as of patch 3.1. However, as I said before, Candace not being meta doesn't make her bad, and in fact, I think she's a lot of fun. My dream of, DPS Xingqiu is one step closer to becoming reality, although I'll just have to keep dreaming and wishing, hoping that one day I can find a way. And another thing to consider is that if you are a newer player that doesn't have a Xingqiu, a Yunjin, an Ayato, or a child, Candace is a pretty good pickup. If you need hydro damage, if you want hydro infusion, if you need normal attack elemental damage bonuses, say you pulled Yoimiya, but you didn't get Yunjin, you don't have Xingqiu, you don't have Yelan. While Candace won't help you vape, at least not very much, at least you get the damage bonus, so that's something. But yeah, that concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, comment down below anything that you would like. The comment section is yours. As always, follow me on all my social media. The link tree will probably, maybe, be in the description down below. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.